Hello, this is Dr. David Billstrom, living the autoimmune lifestyle here in Jackson Hole. A good friend of mine who also played tennis at TCU, Go Horned Frogs, is visiting from Las Vegas and having a great day. Now today we're going to talk about infections, and we're going to talk about an article I just came across in the International Journal of Biological Sciences in 2016. And the title is Fungal Infections, or Evidence for Fungal Infections in the Cerebral Spinal Fluid, the CSF. That's the fluid that bathes the brain and the spinal cord. Fungal infections in the CSF and brain tissue of people with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Now, this information is kind of new to allopathic medicine, but it's really old hat for people that when you're doing work with autoimmune disease, because chronic infections are classic drivers of autoimmune disease. Thus, there's an array of blood work we do specifically for these infections that get in basically with these cloaking devices. You don't know you have an infection until years or decades later, and you start creating all this disease. Now, I would refer you to one of my blog posts where I have every blood test you need to run if you have an autoimmune disease. Now, we often tell patients that whatever you have health-wise, it's all connected. And whatever's causing the autoimmune disease, because what causes autoimmune disease and dysregulation is such a big driver of chronic disease in general, whatever is driving your autoimmune disease is creating all the other problems. So brain fog may not technically be an autoimmune disease, but whatever is giving you your autoimmune disease is giving you brain fog. Fatigue may not be an autoimmune disease technically, but whatever is giving you the autoimmune disease is making you tired. So we test for infections all the time, and there's many infections that like the brain and give a lot of brain fog. So pretty much everybody that we see has some level of brain dysfunction, anxiety, depression, memory, concentration, irritability, you name it. But it tends to get better as you fix the big picture, including you get rid of these infections. So here's this article that writes about fungal infections being found in the CSF, in the brain tissue of people with ALS. And they say that this is also very similar to what they find in people with Alzheimer's disease. And so they're talking about how these fungal infections can be drivers of these diseases. They also talk about how in Alzheimer's disease you have these protein plaques that kind of gunk up the brain and drive the changes. Well, these plaques and these other proteins in the brain are also very commonly seen in ALS. Well, some of the newer data suggests that these plaques are the brain's response to viral infections, and they're trying to protect themselves, the brain cells, by making these plaques because of viral infections. But it then gunks up the brain, and a lot of not good stuff happens. Now, they also say that in Alzheimer's disease, they're finding evidence for bacterial infections. They say that there hasn't been any studies about ALS with bacterial infections, but there is data about people getting ALS when there's bacterial outbreaks, and the ALS goes up. Now, there's also bacteria that we test for the autoimmune disease. You're kind of getting the picture. Here's viruses and fungal infections and bacteria. Now, there's also mycoplasma. That's a big one that drives things like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. And it's not quite like any of the others. And it really likes the brain big time. And also it seems to drive Hashimoto's. So, infections driving autoimmune disease, infections driving ALS, infections driving Alzheimer's disease. Now, I think it's going to turn out that the immune system getting disrupted and allowing these infections to get in, thus it's an immune system issue. The immune system is going to turn out to be such a big player in all disease, not just in autoimmune disease. Well, coming to you from Jackson Hole, have a nice day.